How the teacher supports the children in their various stages of development of second language acquisition is very important. It's important for the teacher to match their teaching strategy to the needs of the child in a particular stage.
What is it?
Cookie.
Is it a cookie?
Cookie chip.
Yvette is very deliberate and intentional in her support of Soyul. In the first stage, which is the stage where Soyul is only speaking Korean, teacher Yvette recognizes that this child only knows that language, and in fact, teacher Yvette tries to say some words in Korean and tries to identify what Soyul is trying to communicate by asking her and repeating the word, and to begin to develop that relationship that, hey, I really am concerned about you, I care about you, I want to know what you're interested in. So you see that very clearly in their interaction.
Cookie chip? Cookie chip. What's cookie chip? Is it structure? Is this cookie chip? Cookie chip?
Yvette has a particularly expressive face. I think you can see when she's in the early parts of the video, when Yvette is trying to let Soyul know that she's intently interested, and Soyul is still speaking Korean to her because she hasn't quite figured out that Yvette doesn't have any Korean language. But you can see by the intensity of Yvette's expression and by the multiple times she tries to guess, what does it mean?
Is this cookie chip? Cookie chip?
You can see that Soyul stops responding after a while because teacher's not getting it and she doesn't know how to tell her, you're just not getting it. But Yvette keeps trying. She keeps trying, and I think that convinces Soyul, that together with other things, convinces Soyul that here is a teacher who wants to understand her, who wants to communicate with her, who will take care of her. So it's establishing the relationship. Maybe because Yvette started school as a non-English speaker, and she remembers how that was, she had a little more English than Soyul has, but she knows what it feels like to be a little out of sync and not have all the words at your command that you might need. That sort of insecure feeling of, how am I going to express myself? And of course that was what Soyul's parents felt very strongly.
소율이가 처음 여기 왔을 때 영어를 전혀 못하는 상황이었습니다. 게다가 한국에서 유치원을 다니지도 않았었고 처음으로 왔을 때 여기 유치원을 처음 다닌 거였습니다. 그래서 집을 떠나서 처음으로 단체 생활을 하는 거였는데 거기다가 언어 환경이 달라졌기 때문에 소율이가 좀 스트레스를 받지 않을까, 소율이가 잘 해낼 수 있을까, 그게 저희의 가장 큰 걱정이었습니다.
So it was really important for Yvette to reach across the language divide in some way to assure Soyul's parents that we would take care of her.
소율이가 그 한국말도 사실은 완전한 나이가 아니었고 그 상황에서 이제 영어를 배우게 되면 그러니까 한국말도 잃어버리고 사실 영어도 잘 배울 수 있을지가 되게 걱정이 됐어요. 한국말을 잃어버릴까 봐 너무 어렵기 때문에 금방 잃어버릴까 봐 거기에 대해서 되게 걱정을 많이 했어요.
And of course that was what Soyul's parents felt very strongly. We're leaving our child in a school where people don't speak Korean, although there were other children that could speak Korean. But how will she take care of herself and who will take care of her? And of course Soyul could mirror that anxiety a little and feel like, well, who is going to take care of me if my parents aren't here? And then Yvette's job is to let her know clearly, I'm here for you even though I speak a different language, and I'll try to understand.
The language that a child brings with them
is embedded in a deep structure of culture that's learned in their most intimate setting with their parents and their extended family. So they're not just learning words and syntax and grammar. They are really learning about how to be, about how to see the world, about how you relate to your elders, about what's proper behavior. And all of that is contained within this structure of language and how you use it to become a member of the culture that you're growing up in. In fact, we all sprang from some very specific cultural lessons learned very, very early that we're probably not even aware of before you even start speaking. How your mother held you, whether she looked at you, the role of your father, what are the expectations for you. These are things that you learn at a very early and very deep level, that the language is a mechanism to communicate and continue with that. So when you do start expecting children to leave a home language at the door or to only use it for limited purposes, what you're really doing is asking that child to leave their identity, their most important lessons behind, and not to use them as the foundation, as the security for attempting difficult tasks and for achieving what this society expects of you.
저 같은 경우는 저희 가족의 생각이 물론 학교 교육도 중요하지만 집에서의 교육도 굉장히 중요하다고 생각해요. 그래서 제가 영어를 못하는 건 아니지만 아무리 노력해도 제가 한국말처럼 잘할 수는 없거든요. 그래서 지금까지 제가 살아오면서 그 많은 경험을 했고 느낀 것도 많은데 배운 것도 많고 그거를 아이들한테 저는 fully 전부 다 주고 싶었어요. 한국말로.
그래서 자기 고유의 문화적 정체성을 가지고 있는 게 자기의 정체성을 확립하는데 상당히 중요하다고 생각하고, 그 정체성을 유지하기 위한 첫 번째 방법이 모국어를 가지는 거라고 생각했습니다.
Bird says, tweet, 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 tweet. Cat says, what does cat say, Soyul? Cat says,
In the second stage of development, the quiet or the nonverbal stage, where the teacher is reading a book to Soyul. Soyul, throughout this stage, does not verbalize, but she is looking at the pictures. She's listening to what the teacher has to say. So the teacher is saying, the bird goes tweet, 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 and so she's looking at those pictures.
do you have ears? Yeah? Should we sing a song? Where is Thumbkin? Where is Thumbkin? Here I am. Here I am.
Then they cut to where they're doing Where's Thumbkin, Where's Thumbkin? And here you see Soyul very intently trying to imitate what the teacher is doing with her hands, with her gesturing. So even though she's not verbalizing, she's trying to participate and be actively involved in the activity by using her body language. So you saw that in stage 2. So here again is a good example of the teacher trying to use teaching strategies and techniques to support the needs of the child at that particular stage of development.
If you just watch the video, because it's clips of times when Yvette was being there for Soyul, you might think, oh, this teacher spent all day with this child. How could she do that? Didn't she have any other children? And of course she does have other children. There are 22 children in that class of 3-year-olds. It's quite a lot. And Yvette was an important person. She was the lead teacher in the classroom. So yes, Yvette had other children and she had a lot to do and she had a lot to keep track of. But for short times, moments during the day, she would be able to give Soyul that undivided, focused attention, which was the part that made Soyul feel, Yvette is there for me.
Lara, I think she's asking you a question.
I make
asking you a question. Come on over. Come on over, Laura. So you can listen. Try to ask you a question. Soyul, what did you want to ask Laura? Do you want to build sandcastles with me? Ask Laura.
Lara, I make
Do you want to join me?
Join me.
Do you want to join her in making sandcastles? Okay. Well, let's get your bucket so that you can build together. Good using your words, Soyul. You and Lara can work together.
I think what she does here that's really important is she pairs her up with another child. This teacher in stage 3 realizes that Soyul's language isn't sufficient to really engage in peer interaction very well. And so she notices that Soyul is looking for maybe somebody to play with, and she says, "Oh, are you looking for somebody to play with? Oh, here." And then she finds her a playmate and says, "Oh, you're going to build, sandcastles. You're going to make sandcastles." So she not only facilitates her peer interaction, she gives them a context of what to do and gives their vocabulary in the sandcastle. So this teacher is very astute in not only recognizing her needs for language development, but also recognizing her need for social interaction with her peer group. So I think that's very powerful.
Soyul, what did you want to ask Lara? Do you want to build sandcastles with me? Ask Lara.
Lara, I make
Do you want to join me?
Join me.
Do you want to join her in making sandcastles? Okay.
She didn't tell her, you have to come and play with Soyul, but she just kept saying, Soyul is asking you a question. Come closer, come back, come over. Soyul wants to ask you something. And then leaving Soyul to say, or sometimes coaching her, giving her the words, do you want to build a sandcastle? But the teacher is now moving away from the center of Soyul's focus and allowing her to focus on having a friend and being a friend and making a friend. And that's a very sensitive and insightful thing for a teacher to do. So sometimes with a less experienced or less empathetic teacher, you might see a relationship begin to develop between a teacher and the child, and then the teacher might maintain that relationship because it is supportive and because there's certain satisfaction for the adult too in making that connection with the child and feeling good about it. So it takes a certain amount of maturity to then step back and make room, but don't step out of the picture. Step back in the picture so that you're still supporting the child, but now the focus has changed. And so I think that's one of the really nice and rather subtle messages that you could get from watching this development of Soyul, first with the teacher, then with the teacher structuring a friendship or a possibility for a friendship, and then later Soyul becoming very independent.
Okay, let's pass it to Soyul. Soyul, does yours sound the same or different? Where is your rain stick? Go get your rain stick. Same or different? Different. Good. Can you pass it to Christian?
When she was talking about the rain sticks, it was important to note how she integrated Soyul within that group. And she was very deliberate in having the children have a hands-on activity to compare the sounds. And the focus of that activity was for the child to understand the word same or understand the concept of different. And so Soyul was part of that group, but so were the other children. And so this was an opportunity to provide support for Soyul's learning of those concepts within a small group activity.
Ballet and
What is that? What is ballet?
Kind of movement.
A kind of what?
Kind of movement.
A kind of movement. What do you
One of the very important aspects of language development for either monolingual or dual language learners is oral language. Children need a lot of practice, and teachers need to provide them with opportunities for that practice. And in the productive stage, you can see how the teacher is asking Soyul about her ballet class and engaging in dialogue, a back and forth dialogue, where he asks her open-ended questions that don't have yes or no responses, where she has to produce language. And this is extremely important in the life of a child learning a language. And to the extent that teachers can integrate this in their day-to-day activities and routines, it is extremely important that that occurs.
Do you have any special things you wear for ballet? What do you wear for ballet?
Ballet. Ballet clothes.
Ballet clothes. What does it look like?
Pink.
It's pink?
Yeah.
Do
And
you-
we have pink treasure.
And pink treasures too.
And then pink flower.
Pink flowers. What else do you wear for ballet?
What is really fascinating about that particular interaction is his use of open-ended questions. That he really engaged her. And this is something that we really want to promote in the preschool with teachers, that they do have language discourse and extended conversations with the children, because that's how they develop their vocabulary.
Ballet shoes.
Why do you need ballet shoes?
Because you have to dance.
You have to dance. Oh.
Children learn to value what the important people in their lives communicate as valuable. And teachers are some of the most important people in your life. So what you say to the children, how you communicate respect for them, for their language, for their culture, sends this huge message about how valuable they are as an individual, as a human being. And they will follow your lead. As you embrace them as a total human being, that feature of interacting with that child then allows that child to blossom and to grow and to accept and to realize their talents and their potential. This is the impact we have as teachers on very young children, is that we really do help to set their sense of self-worth. And so what you do, how you interact, how you communicate, how you demonstrate that respect will have these lifelong impacts on who they become.
소율이가 지금 배우는 것도 너무 즐거워하고 학교 생활을 굉장히 즐거워해요. 그리고 굉장히 조금씩 항상 발전하는 모습을 보여줘서 너무 기분이 좋고요. 학교 가서 아마 잘 할 것 같아요. 친구들이랑도 잘 지내고, 네, 열심히 배우고.